They got to be told.
3.
All right, and we're back with another episode of Wednesday nights, studying through the Bible together with Candy Gallaty. He's back again. We're missing Colin Wood, who is the normal. My dad called last week and said Colin may be out of a job. But I said Colin can go in the booth, you know. He can still stay in the booth, and Chris Swain can hang out in the booth, and Candy's now with me. Hope you guys are having a good week. We have an action-packed study tonight, and I'm telling you, you don't want to miss the end. You have to stay to the end because it's going to be pretty applicable, I think, to today and insightful as well. So, any questions you have, I think you can, Jonathan, they can put them in the chat box, right? You can. Is there an email account?
The pastor@longhollow.com.
pastor@longhollow.com if you want to email questions in about the study, and you can email through the week, and we'll try to answer some of those. Let's just recap where we were last week. I totally forgot where we were, and I saw this come up, and I thought, wow, pretty good stuff right there. We'll get back to that in a moment. But last week we talked about Bema discipleship. I turned you on to that podcast, jcstudies.org. or First Fruits of Zion. I'll give you another one I forgot to mention, and that is the Bible Project podcast. This is a good one. Bible Project podcast. I've listened to the recent one on trees, how trees are all over the Bible. I know it's not very exciting, but did you know what the number 3 most mentioned thing in the Bible, living thing in the Bible, number 3 most mentioned living thing in the Bible?
Trees?
God, humans, and trees. Who knew, right?
Who knew?
Yeah, and the Bible's bookended with trees. Remember, right? A big tree in the beginning, 2 trees in the beginning, tree at the end. And so trees are all through the Bible. We're supposed to be trees, abiding in the Lord as vines or branches on the true branch. So anyway, that's another one you can study. We talk about the messianic movement of Jesus, how there were certain messianic miracles. If you missed that, I think you can go back to that. Jonathan's back taking copious notes again, by the way. Can't they get those online?
Yep.
Where can they go, Jonathan?
longhollow.com/Robby notes.
Ooh, that's a good one. We have to remember that one. So if you missed last week, here's how you can get the notes every week. Go to longhollow.com/Robby, ROBBY, notes. Pretty simple. longhollow.com/Robby notes. Can you see that? Okay, and that's where they'll be every week. Jonathan Simon with that. We talked about how, what's that? It's a little sloppy. It's a little sloppy.
You want me to write for you?
No, I think I got it, but.
Just going to help you out. You actually have a really neat handwriting.
Well, I got Bibles here. I've limited Candy to 2 Bibles, by the way. Last week she had 4 on the table.
I was going to bring 10, but
she's down to 2. So I told her 2, and that's all we got. So 2 each. But you'll need a Bible. So if you have a Bible, turn with me to the Gospel of Matthew. And here's where we're going today. I want to go back and recap because I feel like some of the people who are joining us now missed some of those foundational studies where we started at the beginning of the year, that I just want to give kind of a quick update, because if you miss this, you really miss the scene that Jesus came into. And what we're trying to do is, remember, as an investigative kind of an investigative student of the Word, we're trying to uncover the context Jesus lived in and the culture he came into. And remember, God could have sent his son at any time in any period of the world, any era, any season he could have sent him, but he sent him at this time.
Right.
And so there's a reason he came at this time, okay? So let me go back. Just kind of stick with me on the history lesson, but I promise you it'll be helpful in the weeks and months ahead, okay? Prior to, now this is what's fascinating about people, and a lot of people don't understand this or don't know this, and I didn't know this until recently when I started to study this. There are 5 groups that are around pop quiz time. So if you're watching at home, we'll do pop quiz time. I'll give it to Candy. Candy's always the pop quizzer. And Candy's going to listen to the pop quiz. But The audience can participate. Okay.
Okay.
So if you're watching, you can type in the side chat and see if you got them.
Okay.
5 groups are there at the time of Jesus' coming. That prior to around the 170 period, 168, 170, these groups do not exist.
Ooh.
This is interesting because a lot of people think, and I'm going to name the groups, and you'll say, oh, they were always around. No, they weren't. They weren't always around. They only came about after the Maccabean revolt, and I'll explain that in a moment. And then they're real prominent at the time of Jesus, and then all of these groups basically cease to exist after the temple is destroyed. So roughly around 200, about 240 years they're here, okay? So the 5 groups in the time of Jesus, okay? Let's see if you can name all 5 of them, okay? We're going to start with Candy.
Okay.
And I lost my pencil already. Thank you, Jonathan.
Oops.
Simon with the pencil recovery. Okay.
I mean, okay, like
see.
the Sadducees?
Number 1, the Sadducees.
Is that number 1 or that's just one of them?
Well, I don't think they're...
And no number order.
I don't think they're in any order, but they'd probably be the worst of the 5, by the way, in my opinion. If you're labeling them.
They're
sad you see. Yeah, because they're sad you see because
they do not believe in the resurrection.
They do not believe in the resurrection.
Which is very sad.
Yeah, it's very sad. So they don't believe in a resurrection from the dead. But the Sadducees were the first
I wonder
group.
if that's really how they got their name.
I don't think so.
I mean, of all the names in the world.
That is pretty funny, though.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, their name is Sadducee, and they don't believe in the resurrection.
Yeah, we're going to call these guys the sad you see because you don't believe in the resurrection.
I mean,
I do like that, but I don't know if that's the case.
It's like, what else do we call these people?
Yeah, they're pretty sad. Okay, and they're sad for a number of reasons. So let me explain the Sadducees, okay? The Sadducees were priests. It was the priesthood, but they were corrupt priests, okay? The corruption in the Sadducee movement was so great, okay? Because they were the ones that were exploiting the people. They were the one who were charging exorbitant amounts or exorbitant amount of money for lambs and goats in the temple. These are the guys that Jesus flipped the tables over, yes, in the temple. And these are the guys, in my opinion. Now, who killed Jesus? This is a question we can talk about at another time, and maybe we can spend a little time on this. But the question always asks, who killed Jesus, right? Okay. The sovereign answer, the providential answer is who?
God.
God. Okay? It says it pleased the Father to crush the Son. Okay, that's what the scriptures say. It pleased the Father to crush the Son. Why? Because through killing his Son brought about the salvation of the world. Okay, so God did that. Jesus willingly went to the cross. He says in John, no one takes my life, I lay it down myself. Okay, but if you were going to put your finger on one group of people who started the movement to kill Jesus, who were part of inciting the crowd, stirring up that crowd in the courtyard that day, it's these guys right here. And the 2 ringleaders, pop quiz again, two ringleaders of the Sadducees, the ringleaders, are 2 guys. Okay, do you know who they are? The grandfather, the godfather, if you will, is a guy named Annas.
I thought he was a Pharisee, though.
Okay, no, he's not a Pharisee. Annas, okay, and his stepson, Caiaphas, okay? That's sloppy right there, sorry.
So Caiaphas and...
Okay, Caiaphas, his name's kind of hard to spell. Caiaphas is Caiaphas is the high priest at the time of Jesus' death, but his stepfather, I'm pretty sure it's stepfather, is Annas. Okay? Right. Annas is his stepfather, and this whole family runs the Sadducean movement, and it's because there's a lot of money to be made with the Sadducees. And remember, it wasn't handed down, as we learned 2 weeks ago, I think, by genealogy or through the family lineage like it was supposed to be, yeah. It was purchased through corruption. It was corrupt, okay? So the first is the Sadducees. The second group, see if you can figure the second one out.
Pharisees.
Are people typing in answers right now? Anybody know?
Oh, I didn't know when I thought you were asking.
Well, I don't know. I'm just trying to see if if anybody gets a prize tonight for knowing the answers. Number 2, Candace.
Pharisees?
The Pharisees, yes. The Pharisees. Now, I tried to correct our misunderstanding of the Pharisees, and this is really hard for us. Even my staff, and I'm not going to mention who you are, but some of you know who you are, have a hard time with rewriting their misunderstanding of the Pharisees. Because for years, we've always been told that the Pharisees, Jesus hated them, and he didn't have time for them, and he disowned them, and he disrespected them. And the reality is, Jesus did attack the Pharisees more than any other group. But the reason he's attacking the Pharisees is because he expects more from them. You have to realize this. The Pharisees' theology, if you put their theology next to Jesus's theology, as far as believing certain resurrection, their belief of God, their respect for the law, their commitment to fast, their commitment and passion to tithe, all those things, they would line up perfectly with Jesus. The problem with the Pharisees, we talked about this last week, was that they had so many fences or rules that they put around the law that they created this system of legalism where they missed the heart of the law. So you have to look at this, and this is a good way to think of it. Jesus is confronting the Pharisees all the time because he's like a coach who is just kind of riding the back of a player that he knows could do more. Now, when I was in high school, I had a basketball coach. My mom and dad will tell you this, and they're probably watching, but they'll probably tell you this. His name was Coach Priola, and Coach Priola was on me all the time. Okay, he was always yelling. He was always, Now, I thought I was Michael Jordan growing up, but the problem was I wasn't. But in my mind, I thought I was, and I thought I could do the moves, but I couldn't. So I would miss many of the shots, and he would yell at me. One time, my mom has him on film. This is a true story, Jonathan, where he is screaming my name from the sideline. And I'm on the bench. Okay. So that was one of the coolest stories. But anyway, he was on me because he knew that if I got serious, I could play better.
Right.
Okay. Some of you have been the beneficiary of that. Like a coach is always on you, always criticizing. Now, if you don't know his motive, you would think the coach hates you. And in my case, he may have. But the reality is he's doing that because he knows you can do better. That's what Jesus is doing to the Pharisees, I believe. Now, does he criticize them? Yeah, you guys are like whitewashed tombs. You guys are good on the outside, dying on the inside. Your lips are close, your hearts are far from it. Yes.
But don't you think the Pharisees started it?
Started what?
The back and forth between them and Jesus, because they're the ones that are always like hovering in the background trying to catch him doing something, or you know what I'm saying? Like they started it.
They had a corner in their minds on the theological market. And when Jesus shows up on the scene, they're like, who's this guy? He's not part of us. He didn't go to any one of these rabbinic schools. Where are you getting this authority, right? So anyway, so that's the Pharisees, okay? Number 3.
They got them.
They got them all.
All but one.
All but one.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. The audience is sharp. We got a sharp group watching. I'm just telling you, really sharp group today. Okay. Number 3 is, do you know? Starts with a Z. Z.
The Zealots?
The Zealots. Okay. The Zealots. Now, the Zealots were an interesting group. Okay. We know one guy who was a follower of Jesus who actually had the name. He was so zealous. Remember his name? Simon the Zealot. Okay. Now, some people believe Judas Iscariot was a zealot. There's even a case to be made that Peter was a zealot. Okay. Now, why are you saying that? Well, the zealots were people who were passionate about restoring Israel, but they were going about it very differently than Jesus wanted. Okay. So in their mind, they were going to get rid of the Romans, but they're not going to wait for peace to come through a treaty or bargaining or through an agreement. We're going to take it by force. So what they would do is they would carry these little swords called machairoses, little swords. And basically they would take these little hooked swords, they were like a hook on them, they'd keep them in their robes, and they would literally assassinate people. They would take people out, and they would attack people, and they were always ready to fight, and they're ready to call down fire and, attack their enemies. I think Peter has a zealous type of response to starting the movement of the kingdom of heaven in the garden. Because he gets up from sleeping in the nap, and by the way, I'll talk about this Sunday in my sermon, but he gets up in the garden half asleep, And Judas comes with the soldiers, the entourage. What does Peter do? He pulls out his sword, and what is he going to do?
Cut off the ear.
He's going to cut. Now, what would possess a man with one little sword to try to attack an army of men who are trained warriors? What would possess him to do that? Because he knows that Jesus is on his side, and he's seen what Jesus can do. This is the man who can walk on water. This is the man who can multiply catfish po' boys on the side of a mountainside. I mean, this guy's for real, right? He can heal the dead and give sight to the blind. And he knows if Jesus winks, the whole army's done. But Jesus heals the ear, and he's like, Peter, that's not why I'm here. We didn't come for this. Put the sword away, okay? So the Zealots were very passionate about taking over by force. Number 4.
Sanhedrin?
Sanhedrin, no. Starts with an H. This is the one people probably didn't get.
Hellenists.
No, not that close. They were Hellenistic Jews, but they were called.
No. Let me think.
They were called. Do you know this one starts with an H? It's named after a person who was prominent in the first. Herodians. Yep, the Herodians. Guess how many times? Another pop quiz. Guess how many times the word Herodian is mentioned in the Bible?
1.
2. Close. 2. So we don't know much about the Herodians, but we do know that they were Hellenistic Jews who were supportive of the guy who led, the president. That'd be like I guess you could say they're like pro-Trump people today. It'd be similar to that today. So they were passionate about Herod. Herod could do no wrong, okay? So I know people like that with our president. Okay, so number 5, we'll move on. Number 5, and here's the big one. We'll spend time here.
Okay.
The Essenes, okay?
Oh, you didn't even let me guess.
Sorry, I've already given it to you.
Okay.
You already knew this one. Okay, the Essenes. Now, why is the Essenes important? We spent a lot of time on the Essenes in the weeks before, and I want to go back to this. I tried to make the case that John the Baptist could have been, I know he was influenced, but he could have been an Essene, okay? He was very much influenced by the Essenes because of a couple things. Number 1 is the Essenes were all priests. John the Baptist was a priest. Do you remember this? We did our study on this. We talked about this. John the Baptist was a priest. The Essenes were priests. Right. John the Baptist believed in baptism for repentance. That's exactly what the Essenes did. You go study the Essenes, look at the mikvahs they're called, the baptistries, they're everywhere. The third thing is the Essenes were in the desert. That's where they lived. Based on Isaiah 40, they went to the desert. Where's John the Baptist baptizing and preaching? In the desert, okay? The fourth one, which is one most people have never heard about, was the Essene community was big on adoption. And it's possible, we don't know for sure, but it's possible to speculate that since John the Baptist's parents died early, remember, his parents, Zechariah and Elizabeth, were way older in age, so much so they laughed about having a child. So it's possible that John's parents died early. The Essenes could have taken him in. Now, the two things the Essenes missed, and we talked about this, was that they missed that Jesus was the Messiah. They missed that. They didn't believe in Jesus, or we don't have a record that they believed in Jesus as the Messiah. Now, the second thing we believe, and John did, but the second thing is they never left the community. They never ventured out from the Essene community, and we know John the Baptist did. Now, somebody stopped me a couple weeks ago after I spoke on this and said, well, the reason they never left the community is because they never believed in Jesus as the Messiah. They were still waiting for the Messiah to come, and since John knew Jesus was the Messiah, he then left the community. So that's another reason I think. Now, why don't I bring the Essenes up again? This is so cool. Was Jesus influenced by the Essenes? Okay, that's the question. Was he influenced by the Essenes? Did he know about the Essenes? Did he know about the community? I'm sure he did. In fact, I'll prove it to you. In fact, I know he knows about them, okay? Go with me to Luke chapter 25. Luke chapter 25. I'm sorry. There is no 25. Luke chapter 21. If there was a 25, that would have been a good one, actually, right there. You're supposed to stop me. 22. Luke chapter 22. Luke chapter 22, just to see if you're paying attention.
Okay.
Luke chapter 22, okay? And we're going to read verses 7 and following. Now, let me bring you into the story here. This is the Passover, okay? Jesus is going to celebrate the Passover or the Last Supper with the disciples. Now, there's always been a conundrum with people trying to figure out when did Jesus partake of the Passover. Because, you're going to understand, let's look at the timeline here. Jesus has to die. Okay, so let's do the timeline here. Saturday, Sunday, Thursday. Okay, we have the timeline here. Okay, and the Jewish people count the time based on sundown to sundown. Okay, that's how they count it. So when the sun goes down, that's when the day begins. So
like now.
Friday for them, yeah. So right now for them, guess what day it is? Right now.
Thursday.
Thursday. It's Thursday right now because it's sundown.
This is a perfect example.
It's a perfect example. Yeah, but we're one day ahead. So let's just go a day ahead because we need to be on Friday. But okay, so Jesus is going to be crucified on Thursday, okay, because his body has to be taken down. Let's just say this is sundown, okay, sundown. Okay, so this is when it's sundown right here, okay? Right. Jesus' body has to be taken down and buried before the Passover begins on Friday. The Passover begins on Friday, which would be on sundown on Friday, okay? Then Jesus, so basically this is how Jesus can rise on the third day and die on Friday. Because a lot of people say, how can he die on the third day? This is how. He dies here at 3 o'clock, okay? 3 o'clock p.m. on Friday, which is actually Thursday. Okay, this is interesting.
Wait.
Okay, it's very, very confusing. I probably shouldn't go into this because it's so confusing.
Elaborate.
Okay, so it's Friday. Okay, he's dying on Friday. I'm sorry. I think I'm confusing myself now. I'm confusing myself now.
Yeah.
Okay. So he dies on Friday. Sorry, he dies on Friday. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Awesome.
But that is he dies at 3 o'clock before the next day begins, which is Saturday. Right. That's right. I'm confused. Okay, yeah, so this is Friday.
He's on the cross at noon.
Yeah, Friday ends at 6 p.m. Sorry, Friday ends at 6 p.m.
Correct.
I'm confusing myself. Okay, so he dies on Friday. Mm-hmm. Then you have day 1, Passover, day 2, and then this is day 3. Okay, right. Now this is why I'm saying all this. But Jesus celebrates the Passover, and this has confused people. This is going to help you. I'm telling you, when you hear this, when I heard this, it's so unbelievable. Jesus celebrates the Passover when? He doesn't celebrate it on Friday because he's hanging on the cross. Right. He's arrested, during the midnight hour on Thursday. So he has to celebrate the Passover. You're going to love this. When? On Thursday. He has to celebrate the Passover here on Thursday, Passover night, okay? So he celebrates the Passover probably at 6 p.m. that night, which is Thursday.
Correct.
Okay. Now here's the problem with that. The Passover isn't celebrated on Thursday. When is the Passover celebrated?
Saturday.
No. Well, technically, Friday night to Saturday, which is Friday night, Saturday. So the Passover starts here at 6 p.m. on Friday. How could Jesus celebrate the Passover on 6 p.m. on Thursday? Have you ever thought about this? Now, so I know what you're thinking. Well, he's Jesus.
Right.
He can do what he wants.
Sure.
Yes, he can. Mm-hmm. But there's also another insight I'm going to give you, okay? And it has to do with the Essenes, okay? 3 things I'm going to show you about why I think Jesus is following the Essene calendar for Passover, okay? And they're all in this text. Read 22 verse 7.
Okay.
And I want you to read 7 through 13. And while you're doing that, I'm going to look something up. 7 through 13. Okay.
Verse 7.
Yep.
Then the day of unleavened bread came when the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, "Go and make preparations for us to eat the Passover." "Where do you want us to prepare it?" they asked him. "Listen," he said to them. "When you've entered the city, a man carrying a water jug will meet you. Follow him into the house he enters. Tell the owner of the house, 'The teacher asks you, where is the guest room where I can eat the Passover with my disciples?' Then he will show you a large furnished room upstairs. Make the preparations there." So they went and found it as he had told them, and they prepared the Passover.
Okay. 3 things here. This is so cool. The first thing is this. The first thing is Jesus tells the disciples, "I want you to go." Now remember, it's Thursday. Okay. He says, Thursday, but Friday's coming. It's not Friday yet. It's Thursday. Okay. So, or Sunday's coming. Friday's coming, but Sunday's coming. Okay.
Sunday's coming.
But it's Thursday. Okay. The first thing is this. Jesus says, "Go find a man carrying a water jug." Okay. Is that odd to anybody?
Because the women's carried the water jug.
Yeah. Because, okay. The first thing you understand is, Men did not carry water jugs. There's only 2 examples or 2 options for a man carrying a water jug, okay? The first one is, I'll show you the first one, is in Joshua, men carrying water, okay? The first time is in Joshua, okay? Joshua chapter 9. The only time we see in the Bible where a man carries a water jug is when he is punished as a curse, okay? It says, you are now under the curse. You will never be released from service as woodcutters and water carriers from the house of my God, okay? So the first thing we see is the only time a man would carry a water jug is if he's punished. But the second option is, guess who carried water jugs?
Essenes?
The Essenes. The Essenes were the only group of people where the men carried the water jugs, not Essenes, but Essene. You can look this up. I mean, this is easy. I'm just looking this up
because
online.
there were no women in their community, correct?
This is the Blue Letter Bible. I mean, you can search this out. There were very few women in the community, but you can search this out, Blue Letter Bible. The men carrying the water jug, the man carrying the water jug, may be an Essene. This is not where I got this, but this is an interesting, just one search. There's evidence to say that in the last visit to Jerusalem, Jesus told the disciples, find a man carrying a water jug. Why? Because the Essenes carried water jugs. So the first thing is we see the man could be an Essene. But the second reason I think the man was an Essene is, notice what it says here. Verse 11, it says, tell the owner of the house that the teacher asked you. Now for years I've always thought that was just Jesus saying, just tell him the man, the teacher, is asking for the room.
Right.
But that wouldn't make any sense, because who in the world is going to walk up to a guy, especially with a water jug, and say, hey man, the teacher, the professor at the university needs your house? That's not going to fly. Unless the word teacher means something significant. Watch this.
The teacher.
The teacher is the key. And watch this. Just quick search, teacher of righteousness. The Essenes believed that when the Messiah would come, he would be called the teacher. The teacher of righteousness. So much so that they wrote a whole book about this called the Community Rule. And in the Community Rule, they have right here, God raised up for them a teacher,
right here.
Yeah, right here. A teacher of righteousness to guide them in the way of his heart. So when Jesus says, go find a man because a man with a water jug is like someone walking with bright lights shining off of them down the middle of Main Street in our community saying, look at me, look at me. It was an oddity. So here's a man with a water jug. You never see that. They ask him, can we borrow your house? Oh, by the way, the teacher. The guy stops and he's like, the teacher? And they're like, yeah, the one you've been reading about and waiting for and praying for. He's here, okay? But then the third thing, which is so amazing, is this. Why did they celebrate it on Thursday? And the answer is, the Essenes had a separate calendar they followed that was one day before the Jewish calendar. The Essenes always celebrated, watch this, they always celebrated the Passover, watch this, the Passover exactly one day before the Jews did. So people have criticized Jesus. People have criticized the Bible and said, this ain't true. No Jew would have celebrated Passover a day before Passover. That's like saying you're going to celebrate Christmas Eve a day before Christmas Eve. You don't do that. Nobody's going to do that. Or Christmas before Christmas. Unless you're following a different calendar. So another cool insight about Jesus and the connection to the Essenes. Okay? Neat insight. All right, let's get to our study. You've been waiting for this all week. Here we go. The water analogy with the Bible. Okay, here's a little chart I have, and I've got this from our friends at Bema Discipleship. Marty Solomon created this. I actually redesigned the chart, but this is his chart that he created, and I want to share this with you, okay? These 6 elements are present in most of the water encounters of the Bible. And what you're going to find here is that most water encounters, if not all, follow this paradigm every time. And we're going to walk through a few of them, okay? So if you have a Bible, go with me to Genesis chapter 1, okay? So let's go to Genesis chapter 1. And we're just going to walk through this, okay? And I want to walk you through this paradigm, and we're going to end back at Matthew with the life of Jesus. And you're going to see how the baptism of Jesus follows the exact same paradigm, okay? So the first one is this, Genesis chapter 1. Candy, read that. Genesis 1:1 through 1:3. Okay? Watch this. Hold on. Let me get it on the screen too, because I think this can be helpful. Genesis, hold on, Candy. Genesis 1:1. There we go. Okay.
In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness covered the surface of the watery depths, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Then God said, "Let there be light," and there was light.
Okay, let's stop there. Let's go back to our paradigm, okay? And here's how the paradigm works. Elements of the story, this is present in all of these, okay? The first one is this. We have chaos. There's always some form of chaos in these water encounters, okay? The chaos we have in this encounter is the earth was formless and empty. Another way to say it is the earth was wild and wasteful. There's a connection to this Hebrew word empty that you can actually trace it back to the word for urine. It's interesting. I don't know about you, but urine's not a good thing. Okay, so it was not a good thing. There was chaos. There was chaotic nothingness, if you will. Darkness covered the surface of the watery depths. Okay, so you have chaos, and the second thing we have is what? Water. Okay, so you have chaos, and then you have this water scenario. Now, something's going to happen over the water, because every time you have chaos, water, and you have the Holy Spirit over the water.
Right.
Okay, so let's go back and look at it. It says, the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface of the waters. Now remember, we're picturing this.
Okay.
So let me just go back to here, and I want to show you what we have here. Okay, the word in Hebrew for water. Okay.
Ruach?
I mean, the word for Hebrew for spirit is what?
Ruach.
Ruach. That's how you say it here. Ruach.
I'll let you stick to
Yeah,
that.
yeah, the CH kind of. Okay, spirit.
Candy translation.
Yeah, Ruach. All right. Okay. The word also can mean two other things besides spirit. Okay.
Water.
No, not water. No. That would be cool.
I'm like, we're on a
the
roll.
Spirits over the
right
spirit.
now.
No, that's good. Yeah, that's good. No, that's good. That's good. Okay. Spirit.
Soul.
No, breath.
Okay.
Breath can mean breath, or it can mean what?
What does it start with?
W.
Wind.
Wind. Okay.
Yes.
Wind. Now, when you read the Bible, you're going to see the same word ruach can be translated in those three ways. Okay. And the context will give us what it is. Now, here's what's interesting about this Hebrew word. Very rarely does this ever happen, but it happens with this word, okay? The Hebrew word is ruach. Again, chicken scratch central right here. Chicken scratch central, sorry. Okay. Is that better? Okay. The Greek word, Hernandez, Gus will appreciate this. The Greek word is pneuma, okay? And in Greek, this rarely happens. In Greek, the word pneuma has the exact three translations or the three definitions as the Hebrew word. All three are the same.
Okay.
Pneuma can be spirit, breath,
or wind.
Okay. Okay.
Is that where you get pneumonia from?
Pneumonia, yeah, because pneumonia has to do with the lungs or wind. There you go. That's a good insight right there. I didn't think about that. Okay. So you have God. So here's the picture. Chaos in the world.
Okay.
Water. You have the Spirit over the water. Then you have God speaking. Okay.
Okay.
God speaks, and you just read it. What does God speak?
Let there be light.
Let there be light. And then consistently, this is so cool. We'll get to this in a moment. Every time God is righting some wrong or
reversing the chaos, he always does it through what?
His words. speaking his word. We're gonna get to this. And I'm telling you, you got to hang on. Some of you tuning out right now, don't tune out.
All about the word.
Got to hang on. Okay. Then God gives in Genesis 1 and 2, particularly 1, the expected order of how things are going to work. He puts things in order. So he speaks. Now, remember, and I don't have time to get into this, but the first 3 days of Genesis parallel the second 3 days of Genesis.
He forms,
so he forms and he fills. Forms
I have a little chart on that.
Yeah, he forms in 1, fills in 4. Forms in 2, fill. Yeah, there you go. Forms and fills. Okay, we won't get into that now, but that's how it works. Okay, so then always, whenever God finishes outlining his expected order, there's always a testing. Always. Now, let's go to Genesis chapter 3.
You got the littlest Bible.
I got this little Bible.
Okay.
The little guy.
Genesis 3.
It's a little Bible right here.
Okay.
Well, because you're reading the Bible. This is kind of just here.
No, I got you.
Okay. Genesis chapter 3, we have the test of the what?
Couple.
The couple, right? And Adam, who's the representative of man, is going to be tested. And what happens to Adam? You know how this ends. He's tested and he fails. He fails the test, okay? So this is the first encounter with water, and this is going to frame every other encounter with water that we're going to see, okay? Pop quiz for the audience. Type it in if you can figure it out. Let's see where the next, so the first one's Genesis 1. Let me put these down for you, okay? So the water encounters, okay?
Okay.
Water encounters, okay? Number 1 is creation, okay? So we have this paradigm with creation. What's number 2? Anybody want to take a guess?
I mean, off the bat, I'm thinking flood, but I would
Okay, flood. You're right on point. Look at you. The creative juices are flowing tonight. Okay, you're on it. Go to Genesis chapter, maybe not creative, but the intellectual juices are flowing. All right, go to Genesis chapter 8, okay? Genesis chapter 8, and we have the same exact paradigm. Okay. You're going to love this, okay? So what does God do? What's happening in the world?
Chaos.
Chaos. Where do we get that from? Because the sons of, what does it say in Genesis chapter 6? The sons of God where was it?
Yeah. It's the sons of God saw that the daughters of mankind were beautiful, and they took any they chose as wives for themselves.
Okay. We have the Nephilim passage, which we're not going to touch that tonight, okay? So we have chaos in the world. God sends water. So you have chaos, then you have water, okay? And then you have God over the water. Now, this one's tricky because his spirit's not floating over the water, but notice what happens in verse 8. You got to look for it now. Remember, we're investigating.
Are we in 8?
The text. 8 chapter 8 verse 1.
Okay.
Read this. Watch this.
God remembered Noah as well as the wildlife and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. God caused a wind.
Ruach. God caused his ruach, spirit, wind, breath, to blow.
Pass over the earth, and the water began to subside. Okay,
so God's starting to make it right again. So you have chaos, water, spirit over the water. God speaks. Where does God speak? Look at Genesis 8:15. Notice what he says.
Then God spoke to Noah. Come out of the ark, you, your wife, your sons, and your sons' wives with you. Okay, so here's God again. God speaks, and then he's going to give Noah the expected order. This is how things are going to work now. And then he tests Noah. Going to test him. Remember, God always tests his creation to see if it's pure and refined and obedient. He's going to test him. What happens with the test? Go to 8 chapter 20. What happens to the test with Noah? Look what it says. Verse 20. Yep. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. He took some of every kind of clean animal and every kind of clean bird and offered burnt offerings on the altar. Okay, so he passes so he does the things right, and then he blows it. Verse 20 of chapter 9. Sorry, that's what I meant. Yeah.
9:20.
I was thinking that might.
8:20 is not it. Wrong in the notes. 9:20.
Noah, as a man of the soil, began by planting a vineyard. He drank some of the wine, became drunk, and uncovered himself inside his tent. Okay, and the rest, we know what happens there. He gets in trouble with his sons. Yep. And then we have the Canaanites
start from there, and we have the curse of Canaan because he fails the test. Okay, that's number 2. Let's see if another. Do you know another water story in the Bible?
Crossing of the Red Sea.
Moses, look at you. Exodus, on a roll. Exodus, okay? The Exodus, the crossing of the Red Sea. Now, in Moses' life, we have 2 water encounters and 2 different, you can go some different ways with this, okay? But you'll see. So chaos, let's go back to our chart.
Okay.
Moses. What is happening with chaos in the life of Moses?
Well, all the Israelites are being
the whole nation
oppressed. Yes,
the whole nation's bricklayers. Mm-hmm. They're under the oppression of the Egyptians. Okay, God is going to set them free, and He's going to lead them to a water. You got to understand. At this point, they know the story. Remember, and I say this every week. The reason we don't appreciate the new is because we don't understand the old. They knew the Old Testament so well that it was a reflex for them. They knew these stories. They knew the outcome. They lived the Word. The Word was central in their life. Yes. So when they get to the Red Sea, they know this paradigm. They've heard it before. They know how this thing may turn out, okay? So you have water. Then you have Exodus 14:21. Okay, let me take you there. God takes them to the Red Sea. That's the water. Exodus 14:21. And then you have, okay.
I have a full
Okay, Rig.
special appearance, guest star Riggy Piggy. I preached one time.
All right, and that'll be the last time you preach. Okay, anyway, I'm playing.
He's picking.
I'm playing. Okay, come on, son. Okay.
Goodbye. I got him.
Y'all never have problems like this in your house, I promise. But anyway, okay.
We've lost all control.
We lost the whole thing. Yeah. Okay. So water, and then we have spirit or wind over the water. Exodus 14:21.
Okay. Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord drove the sea back with a powerful east wind.
There it is. The Ruach again. This Ruach of God just shows up over and over again. Okay? So he pushes the sea back. And then verse 26, God's going to do what he always does. What is the paradigm? Chaos, water, spirit over the water, wind over the water. And then what is he going to do?
Speak.
He's going to speak.
Then the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea so that the water may come back on the Egyptians, on their chariots and horsemen.
Ooh, okay. So he speaks. Mm-hmm. Then this is where the story kind of goes in two ways, okay? Because once God speaks, he gives the expected order. Okay. Either he's going to give them the order on how to live and follow suit with the manna, which is what he does. Remember, he gives the instructions with the manna. Mm-hmm. You're going to follow this. You're going to follow the pillar of fire by day or night, and the cloud by day. Those are the instructions. Or the expected order is given on Sinai. So there's 2 ways you can go with this. But then Moses is tested. Okay. Mm-hmm. How was Moses tested? Do you know? Anybody remember?
There's a couple ways.
Okay, tell me.
Like the water on the rock?
Well, Moses is tested with water. He's tested with water. Yeah. Where is he tested with water? He's tested at Numbers 20. Now, Moses has 2 tests with waters. Okay? 2 different water encounters. And let me explain to you the water encounters. I think the first one's Exodus 17. If I'm not right. Yep. Well, Exodus 17 is the first water test. Okay. Yes. Now, here's what you got to understand. Moses was what's called a Bedouin. Okay. You can search this later. But the Bedouin community, okay, I think that's how you spell it. The Bedouin community. A Bedouin was a homeless or kind of a nomad kind of
like
person.
Like a transient. Well, no, not really.
Yeah, it could be a transient person who knew how to live in the desert.
Yeah.
They could live off the land. Mm-hmm. Now you gotta understand, living in the desert is very different than living on the streets in America because you have to be able to find water. Mm. Bedouins could find water in the rocks. Okay, this is really crazy to think about. But in the desert, from the rainstorms that would happen sporadically, water would kind of pool up in the crevices of the mountains. And a Bedouin could look at a rock crevice and know where to hit it with his spear, strike the rock, and then water would come out kind of like a waterfall. Okay? So in Exodus 17, and this is what you have to remember, when Moses calls water from the rock in Exodus 17, that's not miraculous. I mean, it was miraculous because God gave the water and gave water to the nation of, up to 2 million, 3 million people. That was miraculous. But they wouldn't have really said, man, Mo, you really, God really did it. They would have said Moses knew where to find the rock. God helped him, but he figured it out. But the second water encounter was only supposed to be for the Lord. And in Numbers chapter 20, God says, Moses, you're going to speak to the rock. Don't strike it. The first time you may have gotten credit for it. This time, I want all glory coming to me. Mm-hmm. And Moses, in a fit of rage, remember what happens? God, it's those stiff-necked people you gave me. And he gets mad. And what does he do?
Strikes it.
He strikes the rock, and God still performs the miracle.
He struck it twice, too.
He struck it twice, yeah. Now, 1 Corinthians chapter 10 says, when Moses struck the rock was Christ. That's an interesting thing. We don't have time for that today. You can search that one on your own. The rock was Christ. And God's saying, don't strike the rock, speak to the rock. Okay? It's a whole other dynamic.
It does say abundant water gushed out.
Yeah, God still performs the miracle, but Moses disqualifies himself. And of all things, he disqualifies himself in a water encounter. Okay? Now, there's a lot of things there. We don't have time to go into it. But Moses disqualifies himself. And we know the template by this point. The template's always the same. Chaos, water, spirit over water, God speaking, expected order, testing. Let me give you one more. And this is one more in the Old Testament. We'll go to the New. Joshua.
Yep.
Do you know the story of Joshua? With water. Where's that one at?
Crossing the Jordan.
Crossing the Jordan. I think it's Joshua 4 or 6. Let's see. Get Joshua 3 and 4.
This is the stone memorial.
Yeah, the stone memorial, which is awesome. Which is really a challenge for prayer as well. So they're going into the land. Chaos is in the land of Canaan. The land is chaotic. Mm-hmm. Joshua's going to come to the water. And remember, they're going to cross the Jordan River. Mm-hmm. Why does God keep bringing them to water? You have to wonder. Why? Because he's setting up this reflex in their mind to prepare them for Jesus. He's preparing them for Jesus, okay? So he comes to the water. The water's a barrier. The Spirit basically pushes the water back upriver, okay? So it holds the water. Then God speaks to Joshua. You can see this in Joshua 4. God speaks to Joshua, and he says, don't go too far. Put some stones in the ground as memorial. And then he kind of gives him the expected order, Joshua 4. This is what you're going to do. You're going to go into the land. You're going to take out all the enemies. And don't take anything for what? You remember?
Spoil.
Don't take any of the spoils. Remember this? And then they're tested again. And what happens in this testing? Who fails the test? This is a hard one. Jonathan, you know this one. Who fails the test when they go into the land?
Who? This person who takes something?
Yes, somebody keeps something.
Yeah, don't
remember?
tell me. I know it.
It's a good one.
Okay, wait.
Starts with an A.
No.
And it's a seminary president who's a good friend of ours.
Al? No.
Not Al. Al Mohler. Al's a friend too, but Achan.
I was going to say, ain't no Al.
Dr. Achan. No, it's Achan. The Achan,
yep.
Remember? Achan takes the spoils and he doesn't give it to the Lord and he keeps it and God. Okay, so the testing is failed once again. Now, we've finally made it. We're getting to the promised land. Jesus himself. Go back. Go with me now. Pull the New Testament out. Here we go.
Woo-hoo.
You've hung on. Here we go. Jonathan, are you ready?
It's the water, baby.
I don't think we could have built it up anymore, Jonathan. We are there, my friend. We are at the water ourselves. We're on the shore of the baptism. Here we go. Matthew chapter 3. Okay?
I'm there.
Let's look at our paradigm first. Let me go back to here. Okay, 5. Jesus. Okay. And there are more in the Old Testament. You can find them, but that's the ones I want to give. Okay, let's go back to our paradigm. See if you can figure it out. Chaos. What's happening chaotic in the world?
Well, the Romans are oppressing.
Exactly. The Romans are oppressing the people. Not the Egyptians like Moses, the Romans. And it's oppression all over. Okay. So, what is our paradigm? Water. We come to water. So what does it say here? Matthew chapter 3.
Yep, we're at the Jordan.
Verse 15. Let's read what it says.
Well, you want me to go to 13?
John 3:15. Sorry, I'm sorry, 15.
Jesus answered him, allow it for now, because this is the way for us to fulfill all righteousness.
Okay, this is a hard translation, by the way. A lot of people have spent a lot of ink trying to explain what this means. I'll take a stab at this, and there's a lot of ways to explain this. Here's what I think's going on. I think what Jesus is saying to John is, because...
Should we get the context, though? Because a couple verses before
that.
Or you already said
no, he's saying, okay, yeah, let's get the context. So Jesus comes to John. John says, I don't need to baptize you. You need to baptize me. Like, you're the guy, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world.
Right.
And Jesus said, no, let's do this to allow for all righteousness to be fulfilled. Here's what I think is happening. I think Jesus is saying, when he says all righteousness to be fulfilled, he is saying, I'm going to walk in a manner to prove that I'm going to keep the law perfectly. I'm going to live a righteous life. In a sense, I'm going to do what nobody before me could do. That's what I think he's saying. Okay, keep going.
Okay.
So then John allowed him
to be baptized.
Okay, verse 16.
When Jesus was baptized, he went up immediately from the water. The heavens suddenly opened for him.
Okay, stop right there. There's one kesher I'll give you. Jonathan Simon loves these, and we all love these keshers or connections, old to new. I'm going to give you one right here. This is a direct connection to Ezekiel 1:1. Watch this. Ezekiel 1:1, OEZ, starts his book with this same exact line, which I think is so cool. Let me find this for you. Ezekiel 1:1. In the 30th year, in the 4th month of the 5th day of the month, when I was among the exiles in the Sherebar Canal, the heavens were opened, and I saw a vision of God. I think it's a direct connection there. So we have this connection. The last time we saw this heavens were opened was when Ezekiel saw a vision of God, and it's exactly what's happening here. Jesus is going to do and see the same. Okay. The heavens were opened.
And he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and coming down on him.
Okay, this is so awesome. This is so awesome. Okay. What I didn't tell you in Genesis, go back to Genesis 1. What I didn't tell, in Hebrew, it's called the merahephet. Okay, the merahephet is the Hebrew saying. But the merahephet is the Hebrew words for hovering over the surface. Verse 2. You see it? Mm-hmm. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the surface. In Hebrew, merahephet is another way to translate a dove.
Oh.
It's the same translation. A dove floating over the water. Okay? What's that, Jonathan?
Just spell it out up there so people can...
I don't know how to spell merahephet. I don't know how to spell merahephet, but
what about...
you can look it up. But the hovering over the water in Genesis 1 is this picture, a word picture of a dove hovering. And the only time we see this again, or the first time, let me say, we see this again, is in the life of Jesus, where the first time was the creation of all things, and now we see the Spirit of God hovering again to show us, I think, there's a new creation coming. There's going to be a new way of things are. I'm going to create things new. It's another creation, a new way to live. Okay.
What about, can I have a question?
Okay.
Okay. So when the angel comes and tells Mary about she's going to conceive, and you know, says, she's like, how's this be? Because I'm a virgin. And it says that the Spirit will overshadow.
Okay.
Could that be like a similar word? Or, I mean, I know it's in two different languages. Because it
overshadow. It's a good question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I got to look that up. It's similar.
Yeah. I mean, because it's like, I mean, I know it's a separate word, but it seems like the same kind of, like almost maybe. A hovering over her.
Okay, maybe. Let's get back to this. We're not going to have time. Okay, but let's go. We can look that up for next week. That's a go. But the point I want to make here is the only time we see this same kind of picture of a dove hovering over the water is back in Genesis 1. And again, we have the paradigm. Chaos, water, Spirit over the water. Now, what's the next part of the paradigm?
God speaks.
Is God going to speak next? Let's read it.
Dun, dun, dun.
Verse 17.
And a voice from heaven said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased."
Okay, so now we have God speaking. And here's what's cool about this. This is so cool. Because God is going to affirm Jesus before he does anything. That's what I love about this passage. Jesus hasn't performed a miracle. He hasn't raised any man from the dead. He hasn't given sight to the blind. He hasn't caused a deaf man to hear. He hasn't multiplied manna. And yet the Father says, "This is my beloved Son." Now here's two more connections, okay? Those who want connections. Genesis chapter 22, verse 2, direct connection here from Matthew 3:17 to Isaac and Abraham. When he says, "This is my," same word, beloved son, okay? And then we have another connection, Genesis 8:8, when he says, "I am well pleased," okay? That's another connection here. So God's just basically speaking over him. Okay, let's keep going. So they have, "This is my beloved son." God speaks. The expected order is basically his life. It's implied in the text, okay? Jesus' life is going to be putting things in order. And the very next thing that happens is what?
Tempted.
We're tested in Matthew chapter 4. Okay, what happens to Jesus?
He is led by the Spirit.
By the Spirit. Why? The same Spirit, when Ruach, to be tested. Okay, why is he going to do that? Because that's the order.
Right.
The order is Jesus goes into the temptation to be tested. Now, here's what you got to understand. The audience reading this and hearing this for the first time knows exactly how this is going to turn out because they've seen this before. Every single person that went through this paradigm finishes the same way. Okay? Adam goes through the paradigm. He's tested. He fails the test. Noah goes through the paradigm. He's tested, he fails the test. Moses goes through the paradigm, he's tested, he fails the test. Joshua goes through the paradigm, he's tested, he fails the test. Jesus goes through the paradigm, he finishes the test, and it comes out of the test, and he passed the test. And here's what Jesus is showing us. He's unlike any other person who's come before him. Now here's the point I want to show you. How does Jesus pass the test?
You're asking me?
I'm asking you. How does he look in the Word?
It is the Word.
Look in the Word for the Word. Yes. The answer is
because he knows
the Word. He knows the Word. Okay. So here's what you got to understand. Up to this point, everybody's failed, but Jesus. And so here's what I want to show you. The only thing that puts chaos into normalcy is the Word. The only thing that moves disorder into order is the Word. The only thing that takes darkness and moves it to light is the Word. The only thing that takes evil and turns it to good is the Word. It's God's Word. And this is why it's so important for us to start living and knowing the Word. Why? It's because the Word is what God uses to bring order to disorder. Now let me flip it. When there is no Word, order becomes disorder. When there is no word from God, light goes to darkness. And when there is no word from God, good becomes evil. Now, here's the important thing for us as we close. I want to leave you with this. Every day of your life, you have three voices or three influences that are speaking to you. We all do. Every person in here. We have three influences in our life, okay? We have the enemy and his minions, okay? So we have the devil and obviously the demonic forces of the world. So we have the negativity from that coming in. Actually, we have four voices if you take that. The second one, so we have the devil. Number two, we have the world, the system of the world, the Hellenistic, Hollywoodistic society
culture,
of you got to look better and act better and have this and live this way and speak this. Okay, so we have that voice. So it's the devil, the world, and the flesh. The fleshly desires to tempt and to test us. And the fourth voice we have is the Word of God, okay? Which basically would be us remembering the Word, meditating on the Word, thinking about the Word. Okay, here's the thing. If that's the case, out of the four voices or the influences that will influence us as Christians every day, what is the only voice that we can control? What is the only influence that we can control for the good? And it's God's word preached to us by ourselves. This is why this is so good. Every day, you and I need to preach the gospel to ourselves. Every day. This is why you memorize scripture, because you need to have God's word where you can quote it to yourself. When you get anxious, you fill it with the word. When you get fearful, you quote the word. When you get attacked by people, you quote the word. When you get tempted, you quote the word. Jesus Christ is in the temptation. We'll study more of this next week. And the way he wields or fends off the devil is every time he's attacked, he quotes the word. I wonder how many of us wouldn't have the word in our heart, so we wouldn't have a defense for the hope that is within us. This is why we study the text every week. This is why we get into the word, is because every time Jesus is tested, he gives a word fitly spoken for that situation, and it pushes the devil away. Now, here's the homework for next week. This is the homework for next week. The homework for next week is, and here's why Jesus knows the word so well, and you're going to love this. When the devil tempts Jesus with the temptation, he is going to misquote one of the Old Testament passages. He's going to misquote it. And Jesus picks up on this and calls him out on it. So I want you to look this up. What passage? Because Satan knows the word too. You got to understand. The demons know the word. They know it better than a lot of us. What passage did Satan misquote to Jesus? That's our homework for next week. I hope you enjoyed this week. Another challenge to get into the Word till the Word gets into you. If you're following along, I hope you still are. We are reading the F-260 together. So you can read the F-260 New Testament, which is what we're doing. You can read the F-260 Old and New Testament. But if you're doing that, here's what it allows us to do. It allows us as a church to stay every age on the same page. So we're all in Corinthians, I think 1 Corinthians where we start today. So we just finished Acts, now we're in Corinthians. So just want to challenge you, stick in the Word, stay in the Word, get into the Word until the Word gets into you. Love you guys. We will see you next week.